Hey, hello. Okay. I want to talk about that little shape that appears on top of the vault, the catfish vault, where you see a little sort of icon on the door that looks like sort of four triangles on a little circle, basically. Also, this may be a silly little detail, but it seems to me as if the triangles in question are sort of more slanted on one side than the other. They're what's the word? They're almost like 90-degree triangles, but not quite. And this, in my opinion, gives the illusion of like movement, because the slanting on one triangle seems to extend onto the slanting of the next one, which seems to extend to the slanting of the next one, and so on, as if this were a spiraling movement kind of thing being depicted by the shape. That's the sense I get. Then we see this shape even more inside of the vault's kind of cellars, the underwater sections. So why am I saying that it's both outside and inside? I suppose what I'm interested in is that it makes it seem as if that is more than simply a little graphic icon that decorates the door to the vault. It decorates other areas of the inner vault. And that makes me ask the question, like, is it in some way an icon that represents the vault itself or a certain aspect of the vault? Is there something about this little icon that is more central? Because you could say maybe it has a purely utilitarian aspect. Maybe I think it's a little graphical icon, but it's actually a screw or something. And so it's something that's that's used to build the vault. This idea of things spinning round and round is present here, because when you open the door to the vault, it spins, the handle to the door spins. And the handle to the door is also comprised of four sort of jutting, like objects that jut out from a central circle. I mean, as is common, I suppose, in things that spin around, and it spins and spins and spins and opens the door completely. And even inside of the vault, the vault is decorated by these little underwater entrances that have spinning lights that spin around and around the door. I think maybe I'm going to completely switch the topic for a second and go somewhere else. Just for a second, see where it goes. The professor lives in his own little laboratory where he has a lot of books. I think that reading books is something that seems to happen in this laboratory, and therefore seems to be central to his character in some way. He's someone who reads, he's someone who reads. And reading, therefore, is important for him, I think. He's reading a book about rodents of the world, for example. He's interested in finding out about rodents. Weasels, as far as I can tell, are known predators of rodents, so he might be interested in rodents as prey. He wants to learn about rodents so that he can kill them, or so that he can, eat them or get rid of them or something like that. But books, there seem to be other books in this room. Books seem to be important for him, we could wager. And you might imagine, well, he's a professor, so he's someone who's interested in learning and studying. He might be interested in studying, learning, and so on. We can even wager from a later scene that he's interested in writing. He's interested in writing down things, making text, graphics, little sort of analyses and analyses that are written down on a piece of paper that he can then show other people. So he writes books as well. He writes research. He reads research and he writes research. I have a feeling this is connected to his eye. He has a big eye apparatus that highlights one of his eyes as an object that he uses to see and study the world. And I think that seeing and studying the world are central to his character. And for him, seeing seems to mean almost like being interested in the material intricacies of the world. I think there are other characters that exhibit the same kind of characteristic. So I'm going to go and explore those as well, so that we can come back to the professor better prepared in some way. One of those is Rodent. Rodent, the person called Rodent, Private Rodent, who is extremely interested in technical stuff, like nerdy technology stuff. He's interested in tanks and specific weapons and specific technological details about stuff. He's interested in them. And he wears enormous glasses, so his eyes are very highlighted, right? He can see something. He sees something. He's like, oh, that's a tank of that type, and that's this other kind of thing. So he can see things and identify them, learn about them, and he's interested. I think all of this happens through his eyes. His eyes being highlighted sort of evoke the idea of someone who's interested in stuff, I would say. And this stuff is visible. You can see it. That little icon sort of looks like a paper windmill sort of thing, the kind of windmills you carry in your hand and you can blow yourself in the wind sort of thing. It has this central idea of like an axis, like a central element, a circle, and this central circle can spin around, and around it are protruding little elements, that central sort of shape, I think, is evoked by it. Another issue is bats. Bats, I was thinking about how they hear with their ears, right? And what they hear is vibrations, I suppose, that let them geolocate. I don't know what they call it, like geolocate, echolocation. They locate themselves in space. So it is akin to seeing, but they're doing it with their ears. Okay, but the other thing I figured out is that, of course, they are doing it with their mouths because they emit sounds or high-pitched sounds with their mouth. Those sounds bounce off the walls and let them know more or less where they are. So, in a way, they are using their mouths to see. Their mouths are part of their perception organ. It's not just the ears, it's the mouth as well. The mouth is the way in which they see the terrain they're in. So sound and vision, so sound becomes vision in a way. There is that inversion of those two things. I thought that was interesting in relation with the themes in this game. For example, one thing I find interesting is the Panther King and the Professor seem to have this duality between them, whereby the Professor seems to be interested in seeing and looking at things and is good at looking at things, And the Panther King seems to have at least a few scenes in which sound is important for him, I would claim. I'll try to claim this with these examples. So, for example, the Panther King hears the professor before the professor arrives. So before the professor is audible by us, the player, the Panther King can hear him. He's like, oh, I think I can hear the professor coming. So the Panther King can hear things very, very carefully.
Oh, I think I can hear him.
He seems to have a good sense of hearing. That's about enough I want to say about this duality between sound and vision, or hearing and looking. Hearing, in the case of the Panther King, I think also related to speaking, because the Panther King roars, makes an enormous sound with his mouth. He emits a great amount of sound. He's one of the few characters who makes such a big roar in this game. I mean, there are a few others, but you know, he's one of them. He's one of those characters who makes a big sound. And this is maybe irrelevant, but when he speaks, you can hear underneath his English words, there are like growls.
Yes. Squirrel. I've heard of them. Yes. So?
It's as if someone has edited literally like a panther growl underneath his words. To me, it sort of suggests that his speaking is important and powerful and scary or something. There's something about his speaking that's much more emphasized than the speaking of other characters, which is much more just like a normal, just person speaking. The Panther King has like an actual panther growl underneath his words. Yeah, where could we go from here? So there is this feeling then that he is closer to a beast, perhaps. That there is like a beastly aspect to him. Okay, something else we could look into now is the bull scene, the bullfighting bull scene. I'm interested in this scene particularly because there seems to be a circular scenario, like there's a circular location where this takes place. It's a circle, right? It's a circle, but it also has a complexity to it. There's a circle within a circle. I think that you could probably perceive several circles in it. You know, I'm cherry picking here. I kind of know, but there is a feeling where you have like an external row of like building that's circular. It's built in a circle. Then you have like a little circular area of grass, I think. I'm actually going to check this. Yeah, so there is like a trough or like a little mud patch that circles around the main area. Then there's the main area of grass. Then there's like a brick, like a construction little section that's a circle. And then there's a circle in the very middle, which is the actual place where the shit goes in. It's the hole in the center of that section. Now, of course, it's a little silly on the one hand to give such importance to this structure because, of course, it's circles within circles, because what else could it be? It's a circular terrain. If you have a circular terrain, you're going to build circular sort of structures within it. There's not really any other way of building around it unless you made the central shape a triangle. I mean, I guess, you know, theoretically you could make you could make a square shape inside of the circle and then a triangle shape inside of the square shape. You could distribute things that way, but it I think it wouldn't use up the space properly. If you're trying to build a farm like this and you want to make the best, I get trying to be realistic sort of here. If you're trying to build the best farm you can, I guess you would use the space as best as you can. So you would try to optimize, and optimizing would mean probably, I imagine, I'm not an architect, but I suppose you would just build circular structures within circular structures within circular structures, and you would get the most out of your terrain. So you could say, okay, there's a utilitarian aspect to this. Sure, right? Sure. But it is circles within circles. It is circles within circles. This whole area is circles within circles within circles, again and again and again, until you get it to a center. Okay, there's a second thing I want to say about this terrain, though. See, it's not just that it's circles within circles. It's that the central section is arguably the most important section. The central section is where you need to shit into. And since that is like the goal of this section, everything in this section revolves around that circle and tries to go towards that circle. So you are trying to aim for that circular section. That is where the action of this scene needs to go. It needs to go in that direction. So it is a section where you've got an action that goes towards the center of a circle. You know, that seems to be where the action is going. It goes particularly towards the center. It could go anywhere. Like, again, maybe there is a sort of utilitarian, I don't know if that's the correct word, but more of a utility-oriented architectural aspect to this, where you could say, well, of course, the center of this section is where the drain would be, because all of the liquids would naturally drain towards the center, and so it's kind of architecturally normal for the center to be the drainage area. And you could say, you know, that's just the way it is, right? But I can also imagine a scene in which maybe the drainage section is in some other, is in some other way implemented, and you need to go there instead of the center. Anyway, so you need to go to the center. And of course, in order to go to the center, you need to drive a bull towards a dartboard center as well. So you're driving the bull towards a bullseye, and the bullseye is also a section that's you could say it's made of circles within circles within circles, and the whole goal is to get towards the center of that section, which is the bullseye, and you hit the bullseye, and that lets you, advance in your mission, and you're using a bull to hit the bullseye. Anyway, so there's weirdness. There's weirdness around there, I feel. There's weirdness in the structure of the game, linguistically and in terms of puns and how the structure works in that particular area. Of course, the fact that the bull is looking for you, because you are a red squirrel. So it identifies you as sort of the object of its hate, I guess, because you're red. The bull then is driven towards the center of a bullseye because of you. You are, as a red creature, driving this bull towards the center of a bullseye, which is red as well. And the bull's eyes are red, like the actual eyes of this character, you could say, are red as well. What does that mean exactly, right? I mean, red here could mean anger. That's one possible poetic interpretation. Like the bull's eyes are red with anger, with fury. The red eyes are angry eyes, and he sees you, and this anger leads him towards you. But the whole situation is hijacked because you use the bull's anger to, in fact, destroy a series of cows that are hidden in their sheds that shit for you in the center of this section that in itself looks like a bullseye with circles within circles. So the shit is also, so that's a whole other question. Let's ask a question of what does the shit mean here? Why is the shit going towards the center of this bullseye-like shape that this whole area kind of is, or represents, or is constructed as, I suppose? That's the question I want to ask. That's a question I want to ask. Where could we go now? Well, of course, this whole section reminds me at some level of the Bat's Tower section, because you also have this idea of one man and multiple women. So women here are like multiplicity. There's many of them. Man, there's one. A man as, let's say, the man as enemy, as brute, so to speak, is this one central figure. So that, and he's like destroying the women around him in some way through some sort of strange submission mechanism. Like the cows here are literally just tools implemented to obtain shit, and Conker is participating in that act. And it's unclear, you know, what the relationship is between these two places, but I feel that there is a relationship. There is an aspect of man abusing women, women being many. There's a manyness to it, multiplicity, man being one singular sort of being. Of course, you know, again, if we take the man to be the, let's say, the what is considered to be the brute, evil kind of character, instead of Quentin and Mr. Big Cog, I'm kind of ignoring here because they don't have this character of the, what would you call it? The person who is controlling others, controlling the fate of others, the mechanisms through which others can operate, or, you know, stuff like that, stuff around these areas. It's as if there's one central mechanism that controls, and then a whole surrounding series of mechanisms that are controlled by that central mechanism. So also kind of intuitively here, that reminds me of the idea of a cog of a windmill, for example, of a machine that has a center, and around this center a whole other series of mechanisms revolve because of that central axis, or in motion with it. So all of the different parts of a windmill, even though they're separate different, what you call them, I don't know, wings of the windmill, they turn around and around because of the central mechanism, or the central mechanism is the one that operates the movement of the surrounding ones. The surrounding ones move because of the central one, or in synchrony with it, synchronized with it. They move synchronized with the central mechanism. Even though the central mechanism is just one, it seems to order the movements of all the other mechanisms that surround it in some way. So yeah, one central mechanism, a whole series of surrounding mechanisms that turn with it. It feels as if the central mechanism could be said to be the man and the surrounding mechanisms to be women. That's at least, I would say that's the way I'm perceiving the structures in this game, how they're working. That's my perception of it, that there are many instances of a man being a one central sort of mechanism through which other mechanisms around it that are not men or not considered men are surrounded through it and being kind of actuated upon them, or something like that. Some words to that effect. Surrounding mechanisms that are not men, that are being controlled by some central masculine sort of principle or something, man-like event, action at the center of whatever it is that this structure is that we're looking at, I suppose. In fact, for example, in the boiler scene, the imps are worried that the boiler won't be able to perform the task, whatever task he has at hand, an important task. Will he be up to this job? And they say yes, he will be up to this job, despite appearing effeminate, right? They say, even though he sounds effeminate, look, in fact, he has huge masculinity. He has huge masculinity, which we represent through these huge testicles. Like the huge testicles here, like, okay, yeah, this truly means that he can perform the job. What this job is the task that I guess we need to guess. What is this job? What is the job of this machine? The machine that we are studying in some way. Because maybe, what are we talking about, really? Something similar, of course, is happening in Ooga Booga, because what's his name? Booga the Nut, I think, operates under the principle that he is the boss. He's in control of the situation. He's a leader because he has a big boner. Like his symbols of masculinity, his penis, are the important thing that grant him power. The reason he has power socially over other people seems to be explained in this game by him having access to this big symbol of masculinity, his boner. Once he discovers that, this boner isn't as big enough as he thought, his whole power collapses, or he himself is unable to perform the actions that he wanted to perform. Like the imps say, is he up to this job? But being up to this job seems to imply having a big signifier of masculinity in some way, however you want to describe it. You could even say that, of course, the cogs, it is a pun, I would think, with cock, penis. So when the female cogs are liberated, they say something like, finally we're free from this, to exact revenge on this evil cog. That seems, like a kind of joke on this evil cock. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. And of course, the very nature of these cogs is that the wooden stick that emanates from them is sort of a penis, symbolically, at some level. So in the cog section as well, cockhood, penishood is the way that it seems to be some way in which the job is done, whatever the job is. I guess the job at some level is simply control and power over things that are not in control. Does something like that make sense? I don't know, something like that. Hey, so how could we continue this? We spoke about women and men, and I was wondering, maybe we can talk about the ways there, like, what are the shapes of men and women in this game? What are the behaviors? The one thing I find is that there is a pattern of women being sources of some sort of substance that will be useful for someone being men. This is, of course, I'm talking about the cow scene, where it's the women who provide the excrement that you're trying to get as a substance. And then, of course, the, what would you call it? The sunflower. That is, at least, maybe not in practice, but at least, at some level we're speaking of pollination. So we're speaking of bees, the king, a man, obtaining pollen from the flower. So sucking on the flower to obtain some sort of substance, be it milk from the breasts, if you read it that way, or be it pollen, honey, something, right? Okay, so, and what else can we say? Well, almost in direct connection to that, I suppose, there is a theme, therefore, of not just a substance that is obtained, but there is a process by which that substance is obtained, which is a process of, let's say, the man being in control of the will of the woman in some way. Not the will, but what would you put it? Like, there's clearly some sort of way in which man is being posited as the control figure, and woman as that is controlled, if you see it that way. So that, for example, of course, the sunflower is not, like, the sunflower scene is sort of interesting because she doesn't want to have sex with the Sun King. The meanings here are a little confused, because first of all, she's in a posture that's almost like a fetal position, like a position that you could interpret precisely of not wanting anything to come inside, like a sort of barrier, right? A barrier that closes off to the world. And then that barrier is kind of opened up via the tickly bees. So there is some sort of process by which the barrier is opened up, sort of against her will, because her first will is saying, please, like, not please, she says, go away, right? I don't want you to sort of speak to me, or I don't want you to approach me or do anything that opens the barrier. Right? And so we got that kind of situation going. And then, of course, the cogs that get placed on the cog wheel of Carl is the same kind of idea, right? You don't want to be placed there, but somehow someone places you there, even though you didn't want to be there. And in the cow scene, of course, in the cow scene, there is also sort of right, a situation that each cow finds itself in a situation in which their control has been lost. Is a total situation of vulnerability. Like, I'm just shitting here and I didn't sort of choose to be shitting here. Something's happened to me and now, this is happening. Something's happening beyond your control. So that the control of the situation isn't, present or being executed or something. I don't know. It's not there with them. And so then, what are men in this game? I don't know. You've got the bull, for example. The bull in the bull scene is wanting something like the bull wants something that's kind of it's based on anger. Maybe that's one thing we could say. There's something that's based on anger that the bull wants. The Carl, the cog, there's also a sort of like a soothing that happens to Carl because of being in control. Being in control seems to soothe something that previously was very unsoothed. And I think this has to do with this obtaining of the substance. The obtaining of the substance almost seems to be the same as the obtaining of the control, as if the control and the substance are exactly the same substance. And like the king bee is also very sort of, he seems to be agitated without his substance. There's this substance that he needs and he really wants it. He's going out of his way to get it, even if whoever is providing that substance to him isn't providing it willingly. And of course, the Panther King, we got the same idea. The Panther King is angry if he doesn't get his substance. The substance here being milk. If milk is not given, then the substance is what soothes his anger, it seems. His anger grows and grows if the substance isn't provided. Anger in the sense of maybe, things not being how you want them to be. So anger kind of almost implies this lack of control. Like, in a situation of lack of control, this lack of control is not tolerated under any circumstance. I don't want to have a lack of control. I will make you have a lack of control so that I can assuage, or whatever you call it, like satisfy my need for whatever we want to call it, this substance that is control. Well, in this reading I'm making of it, at least, right? So there's something about control here that I find interesting, and it is that control requires something to be controlled, and this thing that's controlled is something like behavior, you could say. You want certain behavior to behave in a certain way. You either want your behavior to behave in a certain way, you're controlling how you should be, or you're controlling how the behavior of things, of other things should be. And so there must be some desire for that behavior to be different, right? You're not happy with the way things behave around you. You would like them to behave differently. So how differently? What is this differently, that you want things to behave? Do you have a script in your head, like things should move from left to right and then from front to back, and they should say hello before they greet me, and they should say goodbye after they greet me, and they should be like this, and they should, do you have a little, let's say, idea of what things should be? Because that's the way it feels to me. You have these ideas of how things should be. And so it feels almost as if what you want is a behavior that accords to a certain idea. So it feels as if what you want is for things to behave in a certain way that is scripted inside your head. You have a little image of how things should be, and you're trying to get things to move in that way, in the way that that script says it should move, right? And that reminds me of cinema, because you've got a script and you're acting. You're acting, and acting out a role is an important part of that. So are movies important for this game? Yes, I think so. Movies are very important for this game because movies are the central mechanism through which this game works. You get little cutscenes that deliver a story to you. You don't obtain many items. In fact, I've heard the developers say, if I'm not mistaken, I've heard the developers of the game say that the movies were almost like the prize that you get. You don't get coins. I mean, you get money, but you don't get like new items to collect and stuff like that. It's not that sort of a game. You don't level up in that way. Instead, your reward for the effort put into the game is the movie. The movies themselves, the little stories that you get when you complete certain moments. So the moments you see in this game, the little stories are the reward. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say with that is that it feels to me that movies are somehow central to the game, and in those movies you act out certain roles. So Conker pretends to be a certain character. Conker pretends to be this. Conker pretends to be that. Certain roles are acted out by Conker. Conker pretends to be certain images in his head, so to speak, that are not him. He isn't that or this. He's acting or pretending. So what's interesting about this, I think, is that the game seems to be structured in such a way that you don't carry any items with you. Again, this is an anecdote I've heard from the developers, at least in some interviews, that to make the game more kind of, immediate, I suppose, or for let's say, to achieve a certain goal in terms of game design and such things and gameplay, I imagine they made it so that you don't carry any objects, even though Conker uses a bunch of different objects. And the way they did this is by introducing the context-sensitive zones. So to continue from that sort of point, I think we were talking about the context zones. If we're talking about the context zones, what I find interesting about them is that they allow you to not carry any objects with you. And to me, this has a few sort of like gameplay advantages with this game. Obviously, my own sort of thoughts on this. This game to me feels like an interactive novel somehow, because the rewards, as I think I sort of alluded to, independently again of what the developers said or didn't say, I'm not super clear on that. I don't want to be very clear on this because I mostly try to express my thoughts on this, but I do agree with I've heard them. I do agree with the fact that the movies, as again, I'm pretty sure I've seen interviews where they say this, that they thought the movies were a central kind of reward in the game. You get movies, that's what you obtain. You don't get money, you get money too, but you don't get, let's say, upgrades and so on. I think I went over this. The movie is the reward, meaning watching something is the reward. This movie's little story, you're getting little story elements. And so, interactive fiction, that's what I was saying. Interactive fiction, point and clicks, those sorts of games, I feel as if sometimes it's a little novel that you're reading and you're getting to the end of the novel, and really part of the fun of it, as I describe it, is reading the story, because usually they're really kind of funny or witty or interesting, and it's a really funny, interesting little story to read. But in the process of reading it, you're also playing a game. And I think that this game has some of that to it. It has both elements. It has, let's say, a game aspect where you make choices and you need to make the correct choices at correct moments. And then a story aspect where the enjoyment is almost about only sitting back and enjoying the story, and enjoying the funny little bits or ingenious little moments that appear here and there in the story. And that wasn't very clear, but anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that the context zones, I think, allow you to almost jump straight to solving the story aspect of this game. You want a TNT detonator, you get a TNT detonator immediately because it's part of the story, it's part of the little like witty joke moment scene that is about to play out. You don't need to go and grab a detonator and connect it to a wire and then maybe get some TNT from somewhere else. You don't need to do a bunch of that scavenging, object collecting. You don't even need to like upgrade your behavior so that now Conker can do a specific kind of move that allows him to detonate dynamite and so on. It's story oriented as I see it. That's how I'm interpreting the game at least. It's story oriented. You want the story to move forward. You want to have a little like fun moment that shows you something interesting, a little story element. So you are watching movies, I think, most of the time when you're playing this game. You're watching movies. Watching movies is part of this game. It's a really big part of this game. It is at some level, it is a movie. It's structured as a movie. It's structured as a narrative, and you're watching it. You're watching the little movies in front of you. So I might want to talk now about Berry. Berry's relationship to Conker. It feels to me that Berry at the beginning can't hear Conker. Right? She can't hear anything. She's listening to music, and Conker rings her to try and tell her that he won't be able to come back home because he's going to stay up drinking with some people. And we get the sense later on that Berry has had this experience before, because she goes up towards the door when someone knocks at the door and is like, I'm not going to let you get away with this anymore, right, Conker? You constantly do this. This is the last time I'm going to let this happen, implying this has happened before, this has happened other times. What I assume has happened is that Conker has, let's say, not communicated clearly what he wanted. Probably at one moment said, oh yeah, I'm going to be back with you tonight. And then at another moment said, no, actually, I don't want that. I want to stay here and drink with my friends, and so on. So I imagine that that kind of situation is being shown here. This sort of, let's say, flakiness on Conker's side, to call it something. And of course, partly, I think, what happens here in this game is that what Conker has been... Let's try and study sort of what's happening. The main issue around this game is that Conker is having a bad day. And it sort of coincides with the fact that it's the last day that Barry is going to accept this kind of thing. I think this is interesting because we could assume from what Barry's saying that Conker has had many experiences of this kind, that Conker has stayed out late at the bar many times. So this isn't the first time that Conker is having a bad day in terms of like a bad hangover or something. I don't think that's all that the game is referencing when it says that this is a bad day. It's a bad day for other reasons. And I partly from a story kind of perspective, I think that this seems to be a bad day because this is the day in which he loses his relationship to Barry, because Barry dies. But also, even if Barry didn't die in this game, she also claims and says that this is the last time she's going to stand for this. So it could be that this is the last time that their relationship is intact, that from this point onwards their relationship is going to end. So it could be that despite her not dying, this might have still been the last day.